I'm Tandy Culpepper. In this episode of The Hollywood Beat, I talk with a professor of music who's also a prolific composer and now the recipient of an exciting new honor from the Grammy Folks. Here's my interview with Dr. James Michael Stevens. Hi, James.
Hey, Tandy, how are you?
I'm fine. It's good to talk to you. You have some big news. Share it with us.
Yes, I was really excited to recently find out that I've been invited to join the Grammys, the Recording Academy, which is the group that provides some of the greatest awards in the music industry.
That is phenomenal. How did that come about?
Well, I had some colleagues that I work with that were already a part of this group, and they had sort of submitted an application on my behalf, and they had wrote me and told me that I'd been invited, and they looked it over my information, and I'm just thrilled to be able to join this great group.
Do you know what the criterion was for being a part of this?
Well, I'm not sure exactly, but I know you have to have a substantial amount of music industry background in whatever area you're in, whether it's in recording or film or songwriting and so forth.
So what category will you be in exactly?
Well, I think I'll be in a category of instrumental, of sacred, classical. I do some film score, type stuff, but mainly it's in educational, classical, sacred type areas.
I had a question, and now it has completely gone over my head. Related to that, it's not what I would call a catch-all, but you have a lot of different arrows in your quiver where this is concerned, correct?
Yes. Well, I do a lot of writing for piano and for organ. I've done a lot of choral compositions over the years, a lot of recordings that are streaming. I have over 1,000 recordings streaming on things like Spotify and Pandora and Amazon Music. And as far as that, like at Sheet Music Plus, where I do a lot of my music for sheet music, I have over 7,000 publications. So it's a really mixture of stuff. A lot of it's organ, piano, instrumental, and some choral.
How does this work exactly? Now, do you take part in nominating people, or explain that to me?
Well, on the in joining the organization, I believe that each member has they can nominate if they wanted to, I think up to 2 people during a given year. And then once someone's nominated, the person uploads a lot of the information about their background and skills and history. And then there has to be some other nominations as well. So it's not just one nomination. So it'd be a person nominated you, and then someone else would also add to that. And then you'd have to add all your information about your professional background as well. And then
so you'll be able to put forward people this year?
That would be possible, yes.
That's terrific.
And would be able to vote in the different categories where I've been listed for the Grammy Awards.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, and nominate people for different awards as well.
Now, that's what I wanted to find out more about. In so doing, you peruse an awful lot of different people out there. Yeah. And have you been looking at anyone that you're particularly interested in putting forth for a Grammy this coming year?
Not so much as of yet, but I will be. I have a lot of friends that are in the area who are very high level, musicians, and we'll be looking at that and sort of see how the process works. And I believe initially there are, in different categories, there's a whole lot of entries that would be in every category. And then I think somehow there's some process where they go through and weed it down to a handful. Like when you see, awards listed, usually it's maybe half a dozen that would be selected from. But it would start with, I would think, probably hundreds before that. And so it's,
Exactly.
yeah, there's some kind of process. I don't know how that works yet, but I'm looking forward
Same
to
thing with
finding
the
out.
Oscars, I think,
Yes, I think so.
and probably the Tonys and also the Emmys. You would be eligible for a Grammy yourself, wouldn't you, if enough people
Yes.
nominated you?
Yes, and that would be I would be thrilled, but I'm not looking forward to that this coming year. But you never know. You just
Exactly.
throw your dreams out there, and who knows?
So you nominate people in a particular category, and then when it comes time to vote for the final awards, are you able to vote on all the awards or just the ones in your category?
I believe that you just vote on the categories that you're listed in, and that sort of assures that the people who are voting are the most knowledgeable about those particular musicians. I wouldn't know about certain areas at all, I'm sure, but yes, it should be just the categories you're in.
You mentioned that you had more than 7,000 compositions in your library, which is a staggering, astounding amount.
Yes.
And we talked before, and you told me that you had outpaced Mozart and Beethoven and many of the renowned composers from the past. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes. Well, at Sheet Music Plus and Sheet Music Direct, where I have some of my music listed on the piano category, I've passed everybody except for Bach at the moment. And sometimes I'm ahead of him, but people upload different revisions and additions, and sometimes he's a little ahead of me. And the same thing in the organ category. I'm ahead of every one that's listed there in the original compositions, except including Beethoven and Mozart and Handel and all those. I'm just trying to catch up with Bach at the moment, but sometimes I'm ahead of him on the piano and all.
That's amazing. The organ. The
Yes.
organ involves pedals in
Mhm.
addition to just keyboard. Is it more difficult to compose for organ than it is for piano?
Well, I think it's just helps just to knowing how the organ works. It's more difficult in the sense that it has three different things that you're writing for: the right hand, the left hand, and then your feet that are playing the pedals. So it's a little bit more complicated, but it's just if you know how the organ works and have an idea, I think every genre is just understanding the instrument. But I've been enjoying the organ. I've only been writing for that really for the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years. And I was excited recently that a composer from Harvard University, Carson Kuhlman, has been recording a lot of my organ compositions, over 200 of them. And he's just a fabulous composer and organist. And actually, today performed one of my pieces in a concert at Harvard University. So I've been really excited about that. And it's something, my background growing up in Southern Alabama, I would never have dreamed, that I would have, had things that would have been in prestigious, venues, like that.
That must be a very rewarding, fulfilling feeling.
Yes.
Getting back to composing, when did you first decide that you wanted to go in that direction? I think you had a composition published when you were still a teenager.
Yes, when I was I guess when I was a teenager, even in like high school and stuff, I started developing an interest in it, and I started really noticing composers on music that I was playing and stuff. And when I was 19, I actually had my first piece that was published, and it was with Shawnee Press, a little piece called "Falling Star." And I was very excited when I was at Samford University in Birmingham. And after that time, I think I'd mentioned to you that it took me another 8 years before I got my second piece published. And this was with lots of effort and lots of trying. I think initially when I got something published, I thought, oh, everybody's going to want everything I write now. It must be, great. But there was a lot of learning to do and a lot of rejection, to face. But I think over time you learn a lot just from the process of not giving up and trying to learn going to workshops and studying other writers and learning everything you can. So it was a process, and then I got back into it, and now have actually probably over 8,000 compositions overall, and in a lot of different venues. I started off writing mainly choral music, and wrote a lot of that with a lot of different companies over the years. And I guess over the last 4 or 5 years, I started really working on piano a lot, and some other instrumental things, because these were things I could do by myself. When you do something for a choir, you have to gather up a choir of musicians to sing for recordings. But if you do like a piano organ, you can, if you have the right equipment and stuff, you can do it all yourself. So I sort of went in that direction.
You compose every day?
Yes, every day. I try to upload something every single day. So over a course of a year, publications right now, the last few years, I've been uploading over 1,000 pieces, a year on the recordings and the publications. And over the last few years too, I've averaged over an album a month that I've released, that has gone to different venues, such as like on Spotify and Pandora Radio. And so I just try to keep moving and keep working on stuff, and just want to just be successful. So the best way to do it is not to stop, keep working at it and moving ahead. So yeah, I try to finish something every day.
I interviewed Jim Brickman many years ago, and you mentioned him when we last spoke.
Yes.
What is your connection to him?
Well, I've never met him. I've admired his music for a long time, and he's just a fabulous musician and pianist. But he sort of was one of my inspirations on trying to in a sense, catch up with the amount of stuff that he has on these different platforms. And he's probably has more than any other pianist. And I think I've in the last year have passed him in numbers. Of course, I'm way down the totem pole as far as recognition, stuff like that. But little goals like that of just trying to reach little goals that you set, I think sort of keep you going sometimes.
Do you teach composition?
Yes, I teach at the college where I teach at in Welch College, and outside of Nashville. I teach choral arranging. I teach private composition, music theory, oral theory. I teach music history, some conducting, and I direct a choir there as well.
You had a composition that has become sort of a worldwide phenomenon that is based on a passage from Corinthians,
Yes.
First Corinthians. Tell me about that.
Yes, a piece is based on the love chapter from 1 Corinthians 13. And it's named "Without Love We Have Nothing." Now, I wrote this along with a just outstanding composer friend of mine, Joseph Martin, who lives out in Austin and who's the head of Shawnee Press. And we wrote it back in 1991, along with a lot of other pieces that we wrote together as well. And then after about, I guess, 5 or 6 years, we thought it had gone out of print. We always thought it was a great piece, but found out about 10 years later that it had become overseas in some Asian countries, a very, just a huge hit. And it's now been recording on over 300 commercial CDs, and at YouTube, you can look at it, and there's if you know the different titles to search for, and like in Korean and Chinese and stuff, there's over 2,000 different performances of it. And then if you search it on the Korean name on Google, there's several million listings you can see. So that's been really crazy to see that, because we had no idea it had happened without us having any idea that it came to be and all.
I found a Korean version. I think it was a quartet of young men on YouTube.
Yes.
And by any chance, have you been in touch with them?
I've been in touch very little with some of these groups. Back in 2008, I was invited I went to 2 trips there, was invited to lead some workshops there. And
in Korea?
In Korea. And the guy who since passed away, Jong Choi, invited me over, and he'd given me a lot of recordings that they'd found, these commercial recordings, and a lot of them were the best 100 songs of the century type thing, or the best contemporary Christian songs, and so it was sort of gratifying to get just a stack of some of these different CDs and books and stuff. So and I know that it's been recorded on almost any genre you can imagine, everything from full symphonic orchestra to rap to hip hop to pop. It's equally famous in Korea as a wedding song and also as a sacred song. And it's been performed in some of the largest churches in the world, including the largest there, which I've was able to see it on YouTube. Of course, never been able to visit. So that's been sort of an exciting thing to see happen.
I'm not at all surprised.
Hmm.
From what do you draw your inspiration?
Well, I guess it just varies day by day. Sometimes, I start with an idea for a tune or melody. Sometimes I'll start with a title. Sometimes I'll start with some, if I'm doing a sacred work, I'll start with some Bible passage or scripture. Sometimes I pray, and I feel like God inspires at times, and it's just a variety of sources. It doesn't ever come any certain way, but a lot of times with the piano and stuff, I'll just sit down and I'll pick a key and start playing and start trying to get an idea. And I do it a little bit different than a lot of composers in my areas would do. Many of them would record things first, would sort of improvise them in a sense, and then after the fact, after they had played it and learned it on their own, would get somebody else to write them down, afterwards. And actually, the way I do it is a little different. I actually, when I do my piano compositions and stuff, I write down every single note, and engrave it on the page like it would be published, and then I immediately record it afterwards, so that I'm not after the fact trying to just transcribe it and try to figure out what I did, but I'm actually playing and recording, what I wrote down on the paper. So it's a little different, but it saves a lot of time in the end as well.
I thought I came across a program that would transcribe music as you played it. Is there such a thing?
Well, the one I use Finale program. There's some other programs. It will do it that way.
Finale.
Finale. And there's some programs like that, and some other top programs people use, be like Sibelius or Dorico or some other ones. And yes, it will do that, but it's not. I don't know any of my professional friends that actually use that particular method, because the way it does it will record it, but it'll be maybe editorially incorrect as far as the way it would be on the page. So yes, it will throw everything up there, but then you've got to go through and do it. I do it in a way where I put my fingers on the different numbers that represent the different rhythm notes, and I'll play a note and then push that number on the computer, and I'm gotten where I can do it real fast. So it's I can input it just about as fast as I can play it. So there's other ways that you can do it as well. So that's always sort of someone's first question is about, can I just push the button on the computer and play it and it'll put it in there? And yes, it will, but it takes more time to after the fact, to do it. I mean, imagine if you were speaking and getting it to transcribe what you were saying. Now it might do that with this AI stuff. It might editorially do it.
I was thinking the very
yeah.
same thing.
I
wonder if you could train AI to replicate or compose in your style. It's kind of scary. The SAG-AFTRA strike that's going on right now, along with the writer's strike.
Yes.
They are concerned that AI may put them out of work.
Yes. Well, I think there's a lot of concern about that, because I think some of these computer programs like that can listen to someone's style and mimic it and perhaps reproduce it. And you're probably aware now there's all these scams right now with people who have with the AI mimic people's voices, where they've can call up someone pretending to be a grandchild of someone, saying they're in trouble and need money sent,
Right,
So
right.
there's a lot of, things like that. And a lot of artists, I think the Beatles actually had something where one of the members' voices was done with AI, and everything. And there's different voices. But I mean, part of me, wonders. I mean, I think there's something that a computer, at least I hope so, that you can never quite put your finger on, as far as maybe original creative spark, that where the music comes from. But I think everything, else can probably be mimicked, styles and patterns and rhythms and stuff like that. So it's a very, very interesting time. So
I think of 2001, A Space Odyssey. Did you ever
uh-huh.
see that?
Well, I'm familiar with some of the music, but I should have seen it.
Of course you would be. Excuse me. The computer HAL
Yeah.
takes over the spaceship,
Oh, okay.
which is that came out, I want to say, in the late 60s or the early 70s. And it was way ahead of its time because computers have become at a point now where people are worried that computers might be able to
Yes.
put us out of business as a race, as a species, which is a strange, very strange thought. I've asked you about your inspiration. You had an interesting journey in your education. Tell me about the progression that you went through getting to this point.
Yeah, where I went to, of course, in high school and Atmore, Alabama, and then to Vestavia Hills. My senior year was that right outside Birmingham, a suburb there. But my college, I went to Samford Universities. I was a theory and composition major. Then after my, I think, junior year, I went on the road with a little country gospel band, and I thought, sowing my musical wild oats, I guess. And then I came back and finished actually in general studies and music and humanities. And then later on, I went to Southern Seminary 1 year in the divinity program. But about 5 years later, I went back and did a master's of church music and composition. And then eventually got a doctorate in the University of Kentucky and doctorate in music composition.
That's amazing. I mean, I was tempted to become a music major. I played the clarinet for many
Oh
years,
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
but I didn't want to have to take music theory. Something
Yeah.
about it terrified me.
Yeah.
What exactly is music theory?
Well, music theory, first of all, I love music theory. I mean, it's probably my favorite thing, but for some people, like you said, it's just terrifying. It's really the science of music. So it's beyond just playing and singing and just having fun with music, but it's actually breaking it down to chords and scales and patterns and musical forms and everything in a very scientific and technical sort of way. And I just think it's very valuable if someone wants to be a musician. They need to learn it and master it. Now, some musicians, like a lot of famous jazz musicians, now some of them have never studied music in their life, but internally somehow they have mastered and understood some of these concepts and can do it without being able to name it.
So
They
they just
know it.
intuit it.
It's intuitive, and they might not be able to put a name on what they're doing, but have a complete mastery of understanding, the sounds and playing, and stuff. And I guess music theory, in a sense, is the sense of labeling all those things, is beyond, being able to just to do it, but able to know what everything is. it's almost the difference between me and working on a car. Once I tried to change my oil one time in the car, and I didn't understand why the oil coming out of my filter that I removed was black, but the oil coming out of the bottom was red. And then when I tried to move my car, I realized I'd moved my transmission fluid instead. you know, so I can I can drive a car. I can drive a car, but if you ask me to open up the hood, and if something goes wrong, I'm in a lot of trouble. Well, music theory, in a sense, is the understanding not just on how to make something, how to play or sing, but is the inner workings of what everything is.
There are some things that are best left to the pros.
Yes.
Of all the classical composers, who had the most influence on you personally?
Well, I think my favorite is probably Rachmaninoff, who was a late romantic composer, who was a Russian composer, who actually came to the United States in 1917 during the Bolshevik Revolution. And he's just an incredible musician, one of the greatest pianists of all times, and wrote some of the great romantic music. I love his music. I love some of the French composers like the Impressionists, Debussy and Ravel. And then I've studied all of them, and I've tried to listen to a lot of the different classical composers. And one thing I do every semester on oral theory is I make all my students who probably never listen to classical music, we have to have a big exam on listening to at least 10 big masterworks where we go through and they have to guess the composers and movements. And I think it's real important to be exposed to the great art and great music in whatever area you're in. I mean, you can't. Basically, when you reproduce things and you write things, it's all coming from the sum of everything you've been exposed to. And if you've been exposed to great music and great literature and great art, along with your own personal background of wherever you come from, then what comes out has the potential of being influenced by some great artists and stuff. So if you're studying and listening to people, make sure you're listening to the best, listening to the great masters at least part of the time.
Well, I was told that the best thing to do as a writer, if you wanted to become a writer, was to read all of the great writers and have an idea of what was done before you, so that you can, for instance, in creative writing, we're told that in composition, you have to have a subject and a predicate and a period at the end of the sentence, whatever. In creative writing, you can throw out the rules and be more flexible. But you have to know the rules before you can break the rules, right?
Yes, and I'm a big proponent of that. I was taught when I was in music theory, like in college, and I've taught it since then. In some ways, you have to initially be put into a box, into a box where and you master, all the important rules, technical rules of writing and literature and music and stuff. And once you know those, then at some point you can use your creative license and break out of that, and you're free to break the rules and everything. But at that point, you don't want to be doing it just because you're a rebel, but you want to knowing what you're doing, because a lot of the great rules in writing and construction of music are there for very important reasons of balance and knowing what are the best practices, what notes sound best together, the same thing with words, are things cohesive, are the things you're writing, you might write a lot of different styles, but each style you write, it can't be a mishmash of all of them. You need to learn how to contain yourself within certain categories, at a time and everything. Beethoven was sort of very interesting because his most famous composition was his Symphony Number 5 with the famous 4 notes, dum bum bum bum, and that was a great piece, but interesting. At the very same time, he was writing Symphony Number 6, which is the Pastoral Symphony. And those two symphonies are completely different, and they were both made him the father of different categories, romantic music, of the traditional and the programmatic side, but were both written at the same time and premiered on the same night. So there's, it's not only about learning the rules, but it's sometimes learning how to, after the fact, know just the right rules to use. Sometimes when I talk about composition with writers, I talk about a box of crayons. Okay, and hope this is okay example, but
no, that sounds great.
When you're young, you a lot of times you give a child a box of 6 crayons, let's say, and no matter what they do, their drawings that they do will never really get beyond those 6 different colors. And they may learn to combine them in certain ways, but basically you're limited by the amount of colors you have. But then you give a child a box of 64 colors. And then all of a sudden, the first thing the child wants to do is, on the little drawing they do, they want to grab every single color and use it on every single, picture. But the trick is, over time, is getting as many colors you can in your crayon box, but knowing just the right 6 colors to pull out for each composition, for each drawing, so that you get as many things you can. But then you have to develop a taste, and style, where what to draw from, and what works well together and what doesn't. And something interesting about the music and stuff, and you think of all the different music styles and composers and music that and in some ways, another way to look at it is that there's only 12 different notes. I mean, there's only 12. You start at a C and go on through each of the notes, but it's amazing that all the millions of the ways that composers have taken just 12 notes, in a sense, and have mixed them up in ways that have all the unique, styles and the unique ways they can do it, where you recognize many times that composer just by the way they string together, the colors of those sounds and all.
That is something that occurred to me. I was listening to someone, I don't know if it was U2 and Bono recently, and I thought, there are only so many notes in a scale.
Yeah.
And, chromatic. I remember that from when I played the clarinet. And you hear all these songs that are so unique and individual. Although it occurs to me now, there was a lawsuit recently. I'm trying to remember who sued whom for plagiarism.
Yeah, was it Ed Sheeran? Yeah, there's been a number of those in the recent years where one of the categories of is, can you copy someone's sort of style, like their grooves and their underlying, type of things, or their melodies, and there's been a lot of stuff like that on copyright infringement, type things, and so that is a category to always be concerned about, and sometimes people worry about that when they're writing, they're thinking, oh no, what I've written is going to be just like accidentally like exactly like someone else's, and it's possible that it might be. I never really worry about that. There have been a few times where that's happened to me after the fact. I realized that once I did a piano song on YouTube, and this lady had pointed out to me that it was just like some particular song. And it was a lead guitar solo that I'd copied. I never even had heard, but I went and listened to it, and sure enough, every note was just the same thing. And I'll never forget, one funny story about that with me was I was writing a thing for a big publishing house one time, and had sent in that I'd worked a lot with, and I sent in a composition, and they were all listening to it. And it got to the very end of my melody, and then they all looked at each other and smiled. I wasn't there, luckily, and they sang, "It's a small world after all." Somehow, without realizing it, the very end of my melody was very, resembled too closely a very famous, melody. but there's a lot of there's been a lot of suits out there and everything, and some people are legitimate or not legitimately have fraudulently have stolen things. They've listened to
Can't
things.
you sample so many notes without infringing on the copyright?
I forget how many there are, but I think there's a few that you can. There's a certain amount together in a certain way that you can do and not be accused. But as that's mentioned before, there's only 12 notes, and there's
Exactly.
only so
There
many.
is there's a march. I don't know if it's Sousa national emblem comes to mind, but there's a portion in there where it goes dun 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 dun
like the Star
dun
Spangled Banner.
dun 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 dun. So it's
Yes,
right there at the. I
and
think it.
that might be one. I forgot it's not the Stars and Stripes Forever, is it? Or that's one of the Sousa
No,
ones, or the
no,
Washington Post,
that's
or
not the
there's a
Stars and Stripes.
there's a he had a
Dun 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 dun.
yeah, that's what, yes. But that those notes you mentioned at the beginning of the Star Spangled Banner too, was the those first three notes are just the first three notes of a chord, from top to bottom. So there's many songs that have used those those notes, and if you think about the only 12 notes, the scale only has 7 different notes, and then you have a certain amount of chords that are normal chords, and many songs use the same chord progressions. So it's like there's so many things you could copy, and everybody copies in a sense, because there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is sort of a recreation of something else that you've heard over time, everything.
Two
So it's hard.
things just occurred to me. I didn't mean step over you, but
Yeah.
we were talking about lawsuits. Back
Yeah.
in the day, there was a suit brought by the people who wrote "He's So Fine," and it was the same progression that came later in one of the Beatles.
Yes.
My Sweet Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what happened in that suit.
Yeah.
And the other thing that occurred to me, when Francis Scott Key wrote the Star Spangled Banner, the melody I heard, now I may have gotten this wrong, came from an old bar song.
Yes.
That people sang.
Yes.
I hope I don't get crawled on the carpet for this, but I wish we had America the Beautiful as our Star Spangled Banner.
That's beautiful.
Nobody can sing. It's our national anthem. Nobody can sing the Star Spangled Banner. There are very few people, virtuosos, sopranos, and tenors maybe, and no one or very few people remember the lyrics, which I find so funny.
No, it's a beautiful song, but it has a wide range. Just the song by itself is like an octave and a fifth, but many times they try to throw up that high note at the end, which makes it everybody feels like they have to do that, and sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't.
Exactly. But, and I remember Roseanne Barr murdering it one time. Final question for you. What advice would you give to young musicians who want to follow in your footsteps?
Well, first of all, I'd say study. Get as much music, as much background, much theory, being around other musicians, learning from every single person you come in contact, and then just get out there and pursue it and not giving up. There's a certain thing that in the industry, in every area of it, I'm sure in the same ones you've been in broadcasting and stuff, there's a thing called persistence.
Yep.
That everybody respects. They respect people that work hard at something, that don't give up, who try to learn, the ropes and learn the right ways to do that. Meet people over time, and it's just a process where you just you try to to keep going, keep working on stuff. Now it helps, I think, sometimes to get around, if you can, the people that are really doing things professionally. You can learn things a lot better from pros who paid their dues and know the ropes and who do it for a living than you can from someone in a small town who's just dreams about it. I mean, your Aunt Ethel will always love everything you do, but can you go to the music centers, the places that are doing it, take the rough, harsh criticism and learning and not giving up. So it's just, and it helps to have a little skill in whatever, or talent in whichever area you're in. I think it takes sometimes, people say it's maybe 10% talent or inspiration and 90% perspiration. So you need to have some natural talent in the area you're in, but then you need to work hard at learning and developing the craft as well. So
that's good advice for almost any discipline or pursuit,
yes.
Isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
I lied. I have one final question.
Okay.
When does the Grammy process kick off? And what are you, well, that's two questions. And what are you most looking forward to?
Well, to be honest, I'm not real sure. They've been sending out a lot of emails on the process, just beginning this coming year, and letting us know what's going to happen and what we're going to be involved with and everything. So I'm looking forward to learning those things and seeing how to be a part of it, and how to go through the voting process, and how to invite others to join as well over time. So that will be a question I don't know really the answer to fully at this time, but I will learn.
I have a third question. I misspoke earlier. Is there any possibility that you could attend a Grammy performance? They have enormous audiences, and if you could, would you go?
I could. I think I would, if I could sort of work it out and afford to get there. It's just. But I would love to be a part. Like I was mentioned, they were doing the concert at Harvard today. I would love to have gone there to hear it. And some days I will show up at some of these things, but one day I would love to. I've been at some different big events like that, so that would be a dream to show up there.
Well, you should make certain that you go to the next big performance of one of your compositions so that you can take a bow.
I would love to. That would be great.
Dr. James Michael Stevens, thank you for speaking with me today.
Well, thank you, Tandy. It's been a thrill, and of course I've enjoyed knowing you over all these years, and glad to reconnect.
We won't tell people how many years that's been, because
that's right.
that will definitely give away.
Surely we're much younger than that, right?
Exactly. We're you're only as old as you feel, and I'm not about to say how I feel. So, all right. Again, thank you very much.
And thank you. It's been my pleasure.